you do not understand white supremacy, what it is, and how it works, everything else that you do understand will confuse you. In all of these 9 areas of activity, economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. Anywhere on the planet, minute by minute, day by day, all of the time, all of the time, all of the time.
Good morning, Grand Rising, whatever you want to say. Welcome to the May 18th edition of the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. Contact number for the show is, as usual, 516-453-9921. And you know the order. If you have a question, please depress the number 1 button and you will get in line. And then your question will be answered accordingly. You can also Gmail me at the numero 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, at gmail.com. And your question at some point will be read. Chat room is now open, where I see Emery Lumumba is in. Hey, Sankofa's there. Let's get on. Code is in the house. Morpheus, thank you. Produce 21 is in the house. So good morning, Grand Rising, Amani, all of you. Swal is there, so thank you. And we should have a good show for you. Mr. Fuller, good morning, and how are you today, sir?
Good morning. I'm still learning.
Okay, let's kick this show off with a question from Lasherian. By the way, anybody who listened to the Carl Nelson show when Mr. Fuller was on this past Thursday, it was outstanding. I listened to it, and so did quite a few people that listened to this show. They listened, and it was quite. It was just outstanding, Mr. Fuller. Congratulations on that. Let's get a question from Lasherian. It says this: Mr. Fuller, during the Carl Nelson show, you said, quote, every individual white person who believes in and practices white supremacy is a part of the system of white supremacy. That doesn't say all white people. It doesn't say most white people. But on your own radio show, you said that it takes a lot of white supremacists to keep the system of white supremacy going. And it is logical to suspect a white person to be a white supremacist because there is no white supremacist list. This seems like a contradiction, Mr. Fuller. Is the population of racist white people smaller than the population of non-racist white people?
I don't know. I don't know the numbers. Just like I don't have a list of who is and who is not a white supremacist, I don't have the figures either. I don't have the numbers. No one has given me the numbers of white supremacists and the numbers of white people who are not white supremacists. So it's logical to suspect any white person who is able, A-B-L-E, to be a white supremacist, to be a white supremacist. For example, a white person who has said that he or she is a white supremacist and who has reached a disability state like all people do, where they can no longer tell the difference between one color and another, like all people, if they get old enough, will reach a stage where they can't tell one color from another. Then that white person, logically speaking, would not be a white supremacist, because in order to be a white supremacist, you have to be able to distinguish colors. You have to be able to know the difference between the color purple, the color green, the color orange, and the color gray. You have to know the color tan or black or brown, and you have to know the non-color, when you talk about racism, white. Because in racism, white is not a color to some people. And in the others, they say that it is, depending on to whom you're talking. So they say you have colored people and you have white people. You have people of color and you have people who are not of color. So presumably, even there's a little bit of confusion in that is the person who is not of color. What person is that? That person is not of color. Is that person opaque? Meaning you can see through the person like the person is made of glass. Well, people are not made of glass. So white people presumably are the color white, but they say that they are no, and then I would be a colored person because I would have the color white. They say white is not a color when you're talking about people. White is a color when you're talking about paint. So it can be confusing, which is why the counter-racist code takes the position that, well, you have three classifications of people: white, non-white, and white supremacists. And that's what you go with. Why? Because going any other route, it gets very, very confusing. And counter-racist science is not about supporting confusion.
Okay.
So I hope I'm clearing that up. But if the white person is able, a person classified as white, is able to be a racist, that person should be suspected of being one. You never say that a white person is a racist unless that white person says that he or she is a racist.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All righty. Hope that answers your question, Mr. Lasharian. This comes from Mr. Mann. He says this: can you please ask Mr. Fuller how police correlate to or serve and protect white supremacy?
Ask Neely Fuller to do what?
Ask Mr. Fuller how police correlate to or serve and protect the white supremacy.
According to the code, police officers do not protect and serve anything except justice, and they treat people the way that people ought to be treated. Police officers, by definition, according to the code, are people who protect and serve people in a just and correct manner. Police officers do not practice non-justice. Police officers do everything that they can to do the correct thing at all times. Anytime a so-called police officer does not do this, then that police officer, by definition, according to the code, should never, ever be called a police officer. He or she can be called a law enforcement officer because he or she is enforcing a law, the law of white supremacy, maybe. And in that case, according to what I've written, in order to distinguish between the two, a police officer can be a law enforcement officer, and a non-police officer, like a race soldier, can be a law enforcement officer. But depending on what law you're enforcing. Now, if you're enforcing race law or white supremacist law, you're not a police officer. You're pretending to be one. You may have the uniform on, but that's not who you are. The minute you're thinking about using the N-word and you use it, or you swear at a person, which has nothing to do with race per se. I mean, you call a person by a name while you're putting them under arrest. Call them, put your hands up, you SOB, or something like that. You're no longer a police officer using that kind of language, because you are showing it's something about you. You don't have the correct intentions. You're supposed to be making the situation better, not worse. This is not a pool hall brawl or something. I mean, you're acting like somebody in a beer tavern or something, and everybody's drunk, where people are calling names and throwing beer bottles and coming out with knives. It's just a free fall. That's a law enforcement officer, all right, but it's enforcing beer hall law. So to distinguish between the two, that's why I invented that term, race soldier.
Mm-hmm.
That's a racist who's pretending to be a police officer. But you don't call him a race soldier because that would still be name calling, and you can't prove it. But you can say suspected race soldier. If the person is a racist and you're a victim of racism, you have a blank check to call that person a suspected race soldier. Suspected by whom? And you can go into court and say that. I don't think this person was a police officer. I think this person was a race soldier, Your Honor. I suspect that this person was a race soldier.
Yes.
And a judge would probably ask, what do you mean race soldier? Well, a white person who is wearing a police officer's uniform, but who is actually practicing racism. I suspect that this person, in this particular case, was that. And you can say that, and should say it. I would say it, and will say it. That's how I would explain it. Because a police officer does not do any harm to anybody unjustly. Ever. Ever. No police officer would do that.
Okay. All righty. 516-453-9921 if you have a question or a VGQ for Mr. Fuller. That's the number you would call. Make sure you depress the number 1 button if you have a question. Another question coming up from Mr. Haynes. He says this, Mr. Fuller. He says, good morning. He said, Mr. Fuller, when you say blacks can't take care of themselves and refer to them as a baby, do you mean every single black person on this planet are unable to take care of themselves with their own effort, focus, and attention? However, now I'm aware that the white supremacists supply everything, but can black people not use the white supremacist tools on them?
Can black people not use the white supremacists what?
Tools on them.
Use the white supremacist tools on the white supremacists?
No, on black people.
I don't understand that question.
Okay, let me go back. Okay, he says, Mr. Fuller, when you say blacks can't, so get back here. When you say, when you say blacks can't take care of themselves and refer to them as a baby, do you mean every single black person on the planet are unable to take care of themselves with their own effort, focus, and attention?
Yes, that's what I mean. I don't take care of myself. The white supremacists take care of me. Now, there are black people who are on what you might call, for example, isolated islands, who never never seen in their entire existence a white person. Or they're so far into the interior, they're what you might call self-sufficient. They just hunt and fish like they've done for thousands of years, probably millions of years. And they speak their own language that nobody else can understand outside of that tribe, including other non-white people of other tribes don't understand. They don't come in contact with each other. They're what you might call super isolated. But they are in the prison called the system of white supremacy. Now, why do I say that? Even though the white supremacists aren't even, it's just 120 of them. Never has been much more than that. It'll fluctuate the population and whatnot, die from diseases or old age or whatnot, but it's never been more than 120 of these people in this particular place. Or are they subject to the system of white supremacy? The answer is yes. Why? Because the white supremacists run the globe when it comes to non-white people. Then the white supremacists can walk in there and wipe them all out. It doesn't make any difference, how long they have been there. They'll say, well, this little tribe, at one time we were up to 500 people, and then it got down to about the average of 120, and there's never been much more than that, give or take a few, for the last 2,000 years. But now the white supremacists, if they want to, they just fly over and drop a bomb, and they're all dead. That's what I mean by white supremacy. They can do what they want to when they want to do it. They don't know about the island. It's on the charts. And then they'll might know that at last sighting, somebody saw what looked like some people in there and whatnot. But those people are subject to the power of the white supremacists. That's what white supremacy means. That's why I say that they are babies. We're all babies. The white supremacists got babies they don't know about. Of course, they got babies everywhere that they don't know about. They make babies among non-white people that they don't know about and don't care about, and just leave them there, go into the non-white population, and go into the females and run through them as many as they want, and pull their pants up and walk away, and don't look back. But they know that they're there. But, they're not head counting because it doesn't matter. They all come under me. I'm God when it comes to non-white people. That's what the white supremacists say. I am God.
Now, is that the same thing that happened to the move back in 1985 in the city of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, I think under Wilson Goode, the black mayor, when they dropped that bomb on the move?
Yes, but it really wasn't done according to the code, Mr. Goode. It was done under the auspices and the power of the white supremacists, because Mr. Goode himself is a prisoner of war if he's classified as black. All black people on the planet are prisoners of war here in 2021. Every last one of them. They're in captivity. Doesn't make any difference if they're isolated or not. It doesn't make any difference if they've ever encountered white people or not. If they try to do anything, try to travel, they have to get the white supremacists' permission. And you might say, well, no, these people on this particular island, people have been spotted them. There's several islands around there. And they go between those islands, yes, but they go because the white supremacists allow them to go either directly or indirectly because they run the entire planet. They either do or they don't. Now, I'm making a false statement or I'm not. Do the white supremacists run the planet when it comes to non-white people? Are they more powerful than the non-white people of this planet, every last one of the non-white people of this planet, are the white supremacists more powerful than them, whomever they are, if they're classified as black, brown, red, yellow, any color, are the white supremacists more powerful than all of them here in 2021, according to what I have seen and according to what I put in my book and according to what this program is about? The answer is yes. Now, that statement that I just made is either true or false.
Okay. He continues when he says this. He says, can black people not use the white supremacist tools on them? Now, I don't know what them means. Either the them is us, black people, or on them. I'm assuming, which is a terrible thing to say, and I cannot ask him because he wrote this. But he says, can black people, let's just assume, if you will, can black people not use the white supremacist tools, whatever they are, on ourselves, since they supply everything?
White supremacists, yeah, black people can use white people's tools against the white supremacists. In fact, that's what I'm doing on this program. What tool am I using? Language tool that I'm using against the white supremacists. This is their language. I didn't invent what you call the English language. I was told that I had to use the English language in order to function. So I'm using it. And I'm using the English language against the white supremacists. That's a tool. Language is a tool. And any other tool that I can use against the white supremacists, I'm supposed to use it. And so in answer to the question, can black people use the tools that the white supremacists invented against the white supremacists? Yes. And they should. Why?
Okay.
Because as prisoners of war, you don't have anything else to use anyway.
Okay.
So you use what's available to you, and they have made these things available to me, like the English language. So I take the same language that they use, I give it definitions where I see fit to do it, compensatory definitions, and use that language against the white supremacists, and make it obvious that this is exactly what I'm doing because it's obvious anyway.
Okay. All righty. I got 3 callers on the line, but I'm going to ask this question, and we'll get to them after the break. This comes from Miss Anonymous. She says, Mr. Fuller, why do blacks have cookouts every year in the summer? Was this activity part of after black people were freed from slavery? Like to know how all this got started.
Say that again.
Why do black people have cookouts every year in the summer?
Oh, because they choose to. You know,
okay.
The white supremacists allow their prisoners of war to have cookouts or any kind of, you want to celebrate Jubilee Day, June 10th, or anything that you want to celebrate. The white supremacists have always said we'd like for our black people to be happy in the system of white supremacists.
Okay.
As long as their happiness is not doing anything that hurts the business of white supremacy. But as far as what you call, the jumping up and down, turning flips, laughing, having fun, playing banjos, oh, sure. Let them do all of that. I want happy prisoners.
Okay.
Happy all the time, on nothing, running on empty. And happy to run on empty.
Okay. Reading this question as this person wrote this is what she wrote. Was this activity was part of after black people was freed from slavery? Like how this all got started?
I don't know.
Okay. That's the best you can do.
Because, for one thing, according to the code, slavery never ended. Once the system of white supremacy was in place, that is the most monumental form of slavery in recorded history. No slave system, has been more powerful than the system of white supremacy. So white supremacy, racism, is slavery. Racism is slavery. It's the same thing. What is slavery? Mistreating people. Anytime a person is being mistreated and the person doesn't know what to do about stopping the mistreatment, that person, by definition, is a slave. A slave to whom? The person who is doing the mistreating. Even on a one-on-one. If one person is mistreating you and nothing is putting a stop to it, it doesn't stop, but you want it to stop. You're being mistreated. You want the mistreatment to stop. It's just two people on an island. One person is mistreating another. But the person who is being mistreated cannot put a stop to it, doesn't know how. That person is a slave to the person who is doing the mistreating. Slavery never ended in the system of white supremacy. The year 2021, every non-white person on the planet is a slave, directly and indirectly. Some of them, are billionaires, but they're billionaire slaves to the white supremacists. Why? Because the white supremacists are supreme. They can snatch that billion anytime they want it. And they can snatch that slave anytime they want it.
Mm-hmm.
They can eliminate that slave. And what has the slave got was they're eliminated if they're dead? They got nothing.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Fuller. Coming up next, after the break, we're going to have David, Mermaid, Darnell, and Sam. Don't forget, when you do call in, press that number 1 button, and you'll get in line to go. You're listening to the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., and we'd like to have you listen and call in. Chat room is now open. To get in contact with the show, just simply call this number, 516-453-9921. Depress the number 1 button, as Sam just did. Thank you, Sam, in Colorado. You can also Gmail me at the numero 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, @gmail.com. And the chat room is now open. And you know what to do when you're in the chat room. All righty. So thank you for listening to the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. All righty, let's go. Let's see here. I thought I had David up here, but maybe I don't. David, I'm sorry that I don't have you on here. See here, all this technology here. Let's see if I can get you on here. Pardon me here. Okay, got that screen up. Okay, David, you were on. If you call back, I'll get you in. But right now, we'll go to Mermaid in Dave. Hello.
I'm here.
Oh, I'm sorry, David.
Can you hear me? Oh,
yeah.
Okay. I'm here.
Oh, okay,
Hey, how you doing, Mr. Bobby?
Okay,
how you
good,
doing
David.
with
Got
Mr.
off the
Fuller?
screen
I'm coming quickly today here.
Okay.
Yes, this question is for Mr. Fuller.
Yes, sir.
What is the code for individuals, prisoners of war, by a thing or a person of color being irritated? Being irritated by a thing or a person, a black person, as an individual prisoner of war. What is the code, and is this some type of weapon by the white supremacists? Thank you very much.
All right, David, thank you.
If I understand the question, what does the code say about a person being irritated by the system of white supremacy?
By a thing or a person, even a person of color, as a prisoner's world, what are you to do? What is the code? What does the code say? And is this some type of weapon?
What does the code say when one non-white person is irritating another non-white person? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
What does the code say about it?
Yes.
Break contact. No contact, no conflict. That's all. If you, I don't know what situation you're talking about, but if one black person is talking to another black person, and that the black person who gets irritated, you might say, or gets upset, or wants to, depends on what the person wants to do. The person wants to get violent or something like that. You just break contact. No contact, no conflict. In fact, that's something that black people should do all the time, really. Black people, particularly in the Northwestern Hemisphere, we don't make black contact very well. We really don't. We claim that we do. We claim that we use this term brothers and sisters all the time, like you wouldn't, but the type of brothers and sisters that we prove that we are doesn't work very well at all. At all. These are just labels, but we don't act like in a brotherly way or a sisterly way. We do the hugging and whatnot on occasion, but mostly we're hostile toward each other. And that's the truth. And the white supremacists has made us this way. So in answer to the question, what do you do about it? You minimize all unnecessary contact.
But how does that work in a survival job situation?
Oh, in a job situation?
Environment, yeah.
Okay, depending on what the situation is. I mean, you got different types of situations. So in a job situation, you have different types of situations. So if the person is irritating you on the job, you go in, like all here on the program, and in the textbook for victims of white supremacy, all problems are solved through what? The process of questions and answers. So if you just want to start with that, I don't know what type of particular situation you're talking about, but on page 171 and 172, you can always go to that. And what is it I want to do? We're talking about wants now. This is on a job, and we're talking about wants. What is it I want to do?
Even if they the boss?
Say that again?
Even if they the boss?
Even if they're the boss?
Yes.
No black person is a boss on a job in the system of white supremacy. Either directly or indirectly, a white person is the boss of that boss, what they call the boss of bosses. Okay? There's a white person who is really in charge. This is, if you want to use an example, this is even true on the plantation. You had what you call the straw boss, or like in the movie Gone with the Wind. You ain't the one supposed to say quitting time. I's the one supposed to say quitting time. That's one black person talking to another. Why? Because boss man said that I's the one supposed to say quitting time. And yous ain't the one supposed to be saying quitting time. What you doing saying quitting time when I's the one supposed to be saying quitting time? And how did I get to be I's the one supposed to be saying quitting time? Because boss man say I's the one supposed to be quitting time. So you stop saying quitting time when I was the one, I was the foreman, I'm supposed to be saying quitting time. So what you do, any complaint that you have, or any dissatisfaction what you have, you just simply say, Well, he's doing this because, or she is doing this because she's been authorized to do it by the white supremacists, directly or indirectly. Because black people are not going to do anything to dissatisfy the white supremacists. I don't care what kind of title they got, because they know they're toast. In other words, they're finished. If the white supremacists say, "Hey, I made you the foreman over the rest of these black people, and I don't like the way that you're doing it. You're doing things that don't meet my approval. So whatever problem you have is with the white supremacists, because they are the prison masters."
All righty. Thank you, Mr. Fuller. Thank you, David. Don't be a stranger.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Let's
Bobby.
go to Minneapolis, and I believe we got it says Mermaid here. Okay, Mermaid, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, go ahead.
Good morning. Yes, I have a VGQ. Good morning, Mr. Fuller, Mr. Bobby. Okay,
Good morning.
My VGQ is: we must replace the system of white supremacy in the healthcare field with a system of justice. The healthcare and medical fields have a history of harming and mistreating black bodies. The white supremacists determine who is healthy and who is not healthy. Too often, race determines the quality of healthcare you receive and have access to. The Centers for Disease Control declare racism as a threat to public health. Of course, we should all strive to be the healthiest versions of ourselves, because it does have a positive impact on our health. But we cannot ignore the fact that the white supremacy in all the 9 areas of activity and in the healthcare and medical field have a huge impact on our health outcomes. This is why I believe we should consider having health be the 10th area of activity. Thank you.
All righty. Thank you for that very, very much. Okay, and again, for you, Mermaid, don't be a stranger. Before I go to Darnell, which I'm going to get, I want to thank Monica. I believe it was from Buffalo that introduced some information about going to your library to request a copy of Mr. Fuller's book, The United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept. Now, if they don't have the book, my understanding, according to the call last week, is that if you ask your local library for that book and they do not have it, that they will purchase the book so that the book will be in the library. So if you want to do that or haven't done that or want to know any information about that, contact your local library to see if they, first of all, have Mr. Fuller's book, which he will be speaking about in a very few minutes, The United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept. And if they don't, my understanding is that they will purchase the book and it will be there for everybody to get. Okay, or to read anyway. Okay, let's go to Pennsylvania in the 223, and Darnell, you are on with Mr. Fuller. What is your question, sir, and good morning?
Good morning, Mr. Bobby. Good morning, Mr. Fuller.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
My question is to Mr. Fuller, to the victims of white supremacy, like, what is the most constructive thing they could do day in and day out to erode the system? Thank you. Mr. Bobby, I'd like to stay online.
Okay.
Follow a code, a counter-racist code. And how do you know that you're following a counter-racist code? The way that you know that you're following counter-racist code is that you make sure that everything that you do consists of 2 words, or everything winds up to be prominent in these 2 words: constructive results. Every black person on the planet, every move that you make should produce a constructive result. When you're doing that, if you're producing something, or you're doing something, or you're saying something in a way that produces a constructive result, you are doing great harm to the system of white supremacy. Because that's all it is. The white supremacists want black people to be wedded, devoted, tenacious about doing things and saying things. I mean, the language that we use and everything, the way that we talk, the songs that we sing and everything are supposed to produce non-constructive results, supposed to make us worse than we are, or keep us in the state that we are in, prisoners of war, prisoners to the system of white supremacy, slaves to non-justice. That's what they want. And anything that you do or say, and the way that you go about doing it and saying it, that produces a non-constructive result is what the white supremacists want. If you're doing anything in any area of activity, economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, or war, if you're doing anything that produces a constructive result, you are doing huge damage to the system of white supremacy. But if you're doing something that's absolutely stupid, silly, destructive, the white supremacists want that. If it does no damage to the system of white supremacy. But if it damages non-white people in any kind of way, they're all for that. They don't want to see non-white people doing anything that produces a constructive result. So you always know, if you're doing something that produces a constructive result, you know that you are doing serious damage to the system of white supremacy, and you most certainly know it if it gets their attention, because they will try to put a stop to it. You are not supposed to be doing, if you're black, anything constructive unless it benefits the system of white supremacy. But if you're doing anything that's going to benefit non-white people in a constructive way, you're violating the white code big time, because everything that black people do among themselves is supposed to produce non-constructive results. It's supposed to do damage to non-white people. From the food that we eat to the guns that we carry, we're supposed to be doing damage to other victims of white supremacy. Mm-hmm. That's the white code. You do anything that's constructive, you're going to hear from them. The minute that they hear about it, they're going to say, well, now, we're going to have to check into this. We don't think you can be doing this. It must be a law, where, we're going to check. We'll get back to you on this one, but it looks like you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing. Now you know that you must be doing something constructive.
Yes, sir. All righty. Thank you, Darnell from Pennsylvania. This is the time that we have Mr. Fuller talk about his book. And, Mr. Fuller, I'd like to say this about that. You mentioned, well, of course, your book last week, the United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept. But you also mentioned a book, I believe it was by Kohari Inaharo, The Race Code War.
Yes.
Well, I'm looking at my... Go ahead.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay, I'm looking at my screen, and apparently there's been a few people that have purchased that, and one have purchased that book. Mafia has purchased the book, and Purdue's 21 is also in the process of purchasing that book. And then Mafia came up with a good suggestion, which is he said that basically you have a movie list which is now out that people can see. He was also wondering if is it possible that you have a book list of books that you would recommend that we read, and I'll let that be a segue into you speaking about your book. Go ahead, Mr. Fuller.
I might, address the second matter about the book list.
Yes.
I just might do that if I can find the time to do it. And I can, books that have lessons that, but the reason I haven't done it and I haven't had much interest in doing it, because I think people don't have time to do that much reading. If you're going to read some books, they can read mine. But there are a number of books down, so many books that I have read down through the years that I don't think black people would, I wouldn't know what book to choose over another book, because all of them, most books of any kind, any book you pull off the shelf, you can turn any page. You might see something on that page. That's just any book that you walk to the library and just pull out any book and just turn any page. Most likely you will see something on that page, if you're concentrating, that might stick with you or give you an idea that you haven't had before, which is what books are supposed to do, in my opinion. Every book is supposed to do that. And so it's kind of difficult to pick out among the millions and millions and millions of books, because there are millions of them that, that I would say is the book. There's no such thing as the book, including my book. It's just so many. Now, that addresses that. Now, the other matter was Mr. Kahari Inaharo's Race Cold War, and people said they couldn't get the book. Well, maybe they can contact, he has a radio program called Straight Talk Live. Now, I don't know how you get in touch with that as such. Someone could probably call in if they can trace down his radio program. It's a regular program, I think, once a week. I don't know, it may be all during the week. Straight Talk Live, I believe, is broadcast out of Columbus, Ohio. And they can probably contact him directly and find out about his book, Race Cold War. And also he has a book called Something Dealing with Sex that's based on codified principles. And that's been out sometime, I have heard. And I think that's Radio 1, WCKX, Straight Talk Live, 107.5 Columbus, Ohio. And that's Kahari Inaharo. But you can probably get some information through that venue. I haven't read either one of his books. I've glanced through them. And I think they might be, since people have said that I mentioned some books that, well, since we're talking about codification, I think black people need every type of codification that we can get our hands on, something that tells you what to do about things. We have millions of books that tell us what the situation is, millions. And these books should be read. But most books about black people, most books written about black people, are about what the situation is, what white supremacy is, and how terrible it is, and all the terrible things that have happened to us. And now we have a slogan called Black Lives Matter. But what we need is some filling in that pie. We shall overcome. We have a lot of slogans. Slogans are like titles of books. But we got to put some pages in the books that tell us what to do about things. And that's what codification is about, what the individual person can do. That's what I tried to do with my book, because that is what is needed more than anything, what the individual person can do. We are all individuals. We're not just, one person is not 5 million people. And black people have come to get in this ideology, and it's logical that we might be that way. Black people got to come together. We got to come together as prisoners of war. What do we mean by come together? We're a bunch of prisoners milling around in the prison yard. So we come together and do what? I mean, this prison is pretty big, pretty fortified. So what can the individual do in this prison that you will be allowed to do or can do? And that's what we need. We need codification for each individual, because trying to organize prisoners of war into a formidable force doesn't work very well, particularly when the prisoners have been programmed to spend most of their time either having fun, doing large quantities of nothing like prisoners do, or fighting each other, which is what prisoners do. Why? Because they're in a prison situation, that's just about all they can do. But when each prisoner is codified in such a way that he or she becomes smart enough not to be a prisoner, that's a formidable force right there. When each individual becomes an organization, each individual person becomes an organization, not joining an organization. The white supremacists are aware of this type of thing, and they know how to disrupt any organization in their prison. But what they can't do, hypothetically speaking, logically speaking, suppose every person becomes an organization of one, an army of one, by having a code. Then the white supremacists are up against a formidable, a pretty solid force. Organizations usually have leaders. They decapitate the leaders when they want to, anytime they want to, and they know they can. Or they'll compromise the leader. Or they'll mislead the leader, thinking that they're more powerful than they are. They do that all the time. And that's why nothing gets done. But when each individual person under codification becomes a leader of whom? Him or herself. The white supremacists are up against a formidable force. And that's what the compensatory counter-racist concept is all about. Producing a code that each individual non-white person has, that the white supremacists have to be all over the place trying to control each individual person as an army of one. That's the concept.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now we can pick up your book by going to where, Mr. Fuller?
ProduceJustice.com. And every non-white person on the planet should become codified, you might say. In other words, have a code that covers each and every move that he or she makes, so that he or she does what? Always has a constructive result. Remember those two words. That's what the entire compensatory code is about. Compensatory means making up for what's missing. We need a compensatory counter-racist code I've tried to set the format for it.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that I've done at least a basic job, the fundamentals, and that everybody else should be thinking code. How do I codify what I do? You can get the textbook for victims of white supremacy and the counter-racist code, which is what it is, by going to producejustice.com.
Okay. I just tried to, I left a message for Kahari to give me that information on how they can get the book and the names of the books. So hopefully I'll have that information available if he answers the message here. We have about 3 minutes and 40 seconds left in this program, so this is what I'm going to do. Sam, I got you in Colorado. Tony from Little Rock, I'm going to get your question. Oh, okay, and now Gabrielle, I was just getting ready to get you, but you did what you were supposed to do by putting in your name. So thank you for giving your name to the call screeners. And that's another thing. When you call in, callers, please, when you get the call screener, give them your name. Please, ma'am, please, sir. That way I can identify you, and we can keep the program, going here. Mr. Fuller, as we wind down this first hour, because we do have another hour, I'm going to give you the last 2 minutes to mention things that you may want to mention before I close out the hour and begin the second hour. So take it away, Mr. Fuller.
Well, I can mention something like a word that has shown up that people can think about, and that's infrastructure. You hear that lately about what we need is more infrastructure among the people of the Northwestern Hemisphere, that the pipes under the ground that deliver water, they're all falling apart. They're gotten rot, been there too long. The bridges are falling apart. The rivers are not being directed in the way that they should, and so we're having floods in places that we haven't had them before on the kind of climate change and all like that. So we need more infrastructure, better transportation systems, build some more highways or widen some of the ones we got or build them up or reroute them or whatever, and maybe get some more railroads that carry people, commuter-type railroads, so that people can get from one place to another without a whole lot of hassle, and with the highways being vehicles, being so many of them, bumper to bumper, do something about that so that people can keep moving and not be stuck just inching along in some spots. That's infrastructure. Now, there's another type of infrastructure, and that is seeing to it that the system of white supremacy is replaced with the system of justice. How about that type of infrastructure? We need a codified infrastructure for that. You know, everything that's in place to finally, after all of these, some people say a couple of thousand years, some people say 6,000 years, getting rid of racism by having an infrastructure, a code that does that.
Okay. All righty. Well, that is going to conclude the first hour of the Counter Racist Code Show. A special thanks out to Black Mermaids. Said this, thank you. She said, thank you, Mr. Fuller, for the broadcast and for your for all the things that you do. It's just such an honor to listen. Thank you for all that have listened. And remember, on this program, strangers are welcome. All strangers are welcome, so do call in. So we have concluded the first hour of the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr. If you have to go, God bless you, and hopefully we'll see you next week. If you're staying with us, stay with us, because we have another hour of the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr. coming up next in about 7 seconds. Welcome back to the second hour of the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. To get in contact with this show, just call 516-453-9921. Please, ma'am, please sure to make sure you depress that number 1 button if you have a if you have a question or you just want to give a VGQ. And you can also just listen to the program on this. Thank you very much for doing that. Also, you can Gmail me at the numero 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, at gmail.com. I can't say for sure that your Gmail will be read today, but it will be read at some date and time on another program, and I will inform you of that. The chat room is now open, and there are many people that are on there. For instance, a Black Mermaid made a very good comment on that. And Al Freedom is in there, along with many others. And the brother from the UK is listening. This program goes all over the world. I call him JJ for short, but he's in there. And Malfia has made some beautiful comments today, and thank you. Swath in Los Angeles always listens. Thank you, my brother. But let's commence with the program, and let's go out to Colorado. And I believe that's going to be Sam. And Sam, you are on with Mr. Fuller. Good morning, and what is your question?
Good morning, Mr. Bobby. Good morning, Mr. Fuller.
Good morning, sir.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, but there's some background noise here, but yeah, we can hear you.
Even still?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Mr. Fuller, you define, and correct me if I'm wrong, you define justice as guaranteeing that no person gets mistreated and guaranteeing that those who need help the most get the most constructive help, correct?
Correct. Justice, according to the code, it's a made-up definition. I did it in 1994, and that is guaranteeing that no person is mistreated and guaranteeing that the person who needs help the most gets the most constructive help. If you don't have those two factors, you cannot have a thing called justice.
So my question is, could you define injustice as guaranteeing that someone gets mistreated and guaranteeing that those who need help the least get the most constructive help? And I'll take my answer off the air.
All right, thank you, sir.
Injustice, according to the code, is mistreatment. Any type of mistreatment is non-justice if it's one person mistreating another. Justice has to do with people. It's not a contest between a person and a rhinoceros or an alligator or a crocodile. It's when one person is willfully and deliberately mistreating another person. That is non-justice. That type of thing should be banished from the entire planet altogether, everywhere. Because like Dr. Martin Luther King is often praised or paraphrased that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, or words to that effect. Might be a misquote there on my part, but I've heard this said many times. I've read it somewhere. Martin Luther King said that. And you can't have justice in one place and non-justice in another, because justice means justice. No one, nowhere, is being mistreated, ever, by another person. Might be mistreated by an animal, but not by another person, because justice has to do with people, interaction between people. And so, and every person who needs help, constructive help, should receive it. This planet can provide it. like there are a lot of people who are starving. But this planet has food that is thrown away every day. That you would have food running out of people's ears. There'd be so much food in that person. Just from the waste food alone, every person on this planet would have so much food in his or her body, food would be coming out of their ears, just from the food that is thrown away. From cafes, from farmland, sometimes farmers throw food away that is absolutely edible because they can't sell it on account of these rigged systems that we have. And all that type of thing. Banquets, where food is just lying around. Food's not even touched. Everybody was so busy dancing and whatnot and enjoying each other's company, quote unquote, that the caterers and many people in the catering business tell you, hey, we have trays and trays and trays of food, tables loaded with food that we just throw into the trash all the time as a routine thing. This is vulgar. This is criminal. And just a few miles away, you have someone who is starving, or some black person who is robbing somebody, just so that he or she can get a hamburger. When 6 blocks away, they're throwing away tons of hamburgers. Not saying that hamburger is the best food, but I'm just saying, it's something that would sustain a person if they're starving and robbing somebody. That should never happen. But we're talking about justice here. In a world in which justice prevails, none of that would be happening. Everybody would be getting what they need.
Mm-hmm.
Constructive help.
All righty. Thank you very much, Samuel, from Colorado. And you don't be a stranger either. Mr. Fuller, before we get to the next question, you mentioned the word at the end of the first hour, near the end, infrastructure. I wasn't born when this happened, but you were here under, I believe it was Franklin Delano Roosevelt. I don't know. I think it was called the Work Project situation or the authority, whatever it was. Did they address the infrastructure that the U.S. needed at that time?
Well, yes. They had things called the Works Project Administration.
Okay.
WPA, where someone, white presumably, during that time, lots of people said, what we need is a lot of projects. They call it alphabet soup. There were so many. WPA was one, and there were so many of them. And a lot of people were in favor of them, and a lot of people weren't, because they said it looks like it was headed towards something called communism or something, whatever that means. Or socialism, which is somewhat akin to communism, they say, whatever that means. I've never gotten all that straight, even down through the years, in trying to study it and understand it. But they said these type of programs were needed. Road building, seeing to it, going out into the forest and seeing that the forests were preserved. They had something called Conservation Corps, and where they had people going out and cutting down trees or planting trees, whatever is needed, in the what they might call the infrastructure nowadays, and just doing things that had to do with the general welfare, they called it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, And people usually don't even like that term, general welfare, and particularly that last word, world welfare. I mean, that sounds like that's going in a direction that displeases a lot of people. But what is needed for black people, well, black people say we need reparations, and I have said, trying to follow the logic, if you're talking about repairing all the damage is done to black people, mentally and physically, you're talking about a long-term job. And like after World War II, since you mentioned the Roosevelt time era, prior to World War II, you had the WPA and all like that, and the Civilian Conservation Corps, they called it, I think that's what it was, CCC, Civilian Conservation Corps, dealing with agriculture and a lot of other projects of that type, I think, forestry and whatnot. And right after World War II, you had what they called the Marshall Plan.
Okay.
You had the Berlin airlift, because in Germany, the people of Germany had been devastated. So they say the people in Berlin don't have any food. So what did they do? Now, they were just fighting these people just a few days before then, and they said, well, we can't let them starve. I mean, we bummed them into extinction almost. So let's get some food in there. So they had a 24-hour-a-day airlift. One plane taking off and another plane landing right in this spot, I mean, minute by minute. It was very well timed. It was thrown together real quick, but it was highly organized from the information that I received at that time in the 1940s. And they fed everybody in Berlin, the people that they had once dropped bombs on just a few days before then.
Yes.
You might say. A few weeks anyway, because the people were starving. So they just gave away food and gasoline and whatever else was needed. I mean, bring in cement, by the train, in bags. C-47, the type of aircrafts that they use.
Yes,
that had
which was a converted
troops
DC-3.
Were now ferrying food and clothing and all types of infrastructure. Okay. To take care of what? Of the white people who had been fighting white people were now propping them up. Say, because hey, we just can't let them die, and so but they don't have nothing. Well, give them everything that they need. So black people are now in this type of position. We have nothing. So what about us? Okay? So this thing about reparations being some type of paycheck, no, that comes nowhere close to the type of repair job that needs to be done.
Okay.
We need an ongoing thing that goes on until we are completely repaired.
Okay.
That's how that should be.
Under that infrastructure, before we get to Tony, was the TVA and whatever they did with Hoover Dam, was that under that same program, or was that altogether different?
Yes, that was a Tennessee Valley Project, and a movie about that. It's an excellent movie called Wild River. Not River Wild. It's called Wild River. That's on the movie list. And it shows that era.
Okay.
And how, what you call government. I remember an old song, about the Works Project Administration. There's what you call a hillbilly song. I got an uncle in Washington. He says my working days are done. Got a paycheck on the way, and I don't have to work on the WPA.
Okay. Song by Neely Fuller Jr. Okay, Mr. Fuller. I didn't know you had, you could say. Thank you. With that, I told you that I love you, now get out. Let's go to let's go to Gabriel from Pennsylvania. Go ahead, Gabriel.
Yes, this is Gabriel from
Oh,
Philadelphia.
Gabriel, okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead, sir.
All right. Hi, Neely Fuller Jr. Hi, sir. Hi, Brother Bobby, Talktainment Radio. Thank you for what you all are doing.
And now we're on Blog Talk Radio. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Yes, I just wanted to say thank you to Brother Neely Fuller Jr. for the work that he's put in. Being a thinker myself, I guess, what he's come up with, I feel like every time I listen to any of your words you speaking, Mr. Fuller Jr., it's like sitting down with the chief talking from anything that you've said over the course of the years. You've paid attention to detail with every word that's come out of your mouth, every thought that you've shared with us. I would be like your grandson. My grandmother was born the same year as you, so I kind of understand the rhythm and the thoughts, even though I didn't grow up in that time. But I just want to thank you for your insight. It's really helping myself and a lot of other brothers and sisters around the world to better deal with our situation and make it better and think about the future in a way that's productive. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for your kind words, sir. Really appreciate that. That was Tony from Little Rock. Tony, don't be a stranger, my brother. Okay.
No, this is Gabriel from Philadelphia.
Oh, Gabriel. I'm sorry. Gabriel, yeah. Gabriel. I'm sorry, Gabriel. Got you. I was looking at the screen for Tony. Let's see here. Let's go to Darnell out in Phoenix. Okay. Go ahead, Darnell. You're on with Mr. Fuller. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Bobby. Good morning, Mr. Fuller.
Good morning, sir.
Yes, sir.
The question I have is truth and hearing truth. My question for you, Mr. Fuller, is why do people, according to the code, why do people, and particularly black people, get real irritated or aggressive or frustrated when people speak the truth to them?
Because the truth is something that the white supremacists do not want told about anything that looks like it's going to lead to the production of justice. In order to have justice, you first have to have truth.
Yes.
You have to reveal truth about everything that has to do with mistreatment of people. And the system of white supremacy is designed to mistreat people. I mean, that's what it's all about. So naturally, anything that's done that's going to have to do with replacing the system of racism with the system of justice is going to have the major element, first of all, and that is truth. In the textbook for victims of white supremacy, the equation is truth plus justice plus correctness equals peace. But the first word is truth. That's the first thing you have to have. What does truth do? The revelation of truth gets rid of, when people tell the truth about everything, because that's what you have to do, tell the truth about everything. If you don't tell the truth about everything, you're not telling the truth. If you've got one falsehood in there, it's going to cause what? Confusion. So truth is about eliminating confusion. The white supremacists thrive on confusion. So when truth comes, confusion evaporates. And then you have an open highway, you might say, to the production of justice, because you can't produce justice without truth. And then you use justice, which is balance between people, guaranteeing that no person is mistreated and guaranteeing that everybody who needs help gets the constructive help. Now you can go to the third factor, which is correctness. Now, what is correctness? You got truth, then you got justice. Now, the people who practice justice, they can now correct all of the other things that don't have anything directly with people except how things relate to people. The animal conduct. Animals do not conduct themselves the way that they should. Why? Because people don't conduct themselves the way that they should. So all of the creatures of the universe are out of order. Everything is out of order because you don't have justice, so you can't have correctness. The environment is not being treated correctly. Why? Because of the disorder in people. You got to get people straight first because they're the most powerful creatures on the planet. But you can't get people to do the things that people need to be doing on account of what? This thing called white supremacy, which is dedicated to mistreatment of every kind, and it glorifies mistreatment, glorifies war, glorifies murder. That's what white supremacy does. So that throws everything out of order. So truth plus justice plus correctness, that's telling the truth, getting the truth about everything, revealing truth in such a manner that you can produce justice, in such a manner that you can produce correctness, and then that will equal what? Peace. What is peace? The combination of truth plus justice plus correctness. You get people and things the way that they ought to be through the use of truth and justice. Then you can get correctness. Then you will have peace, which is the culmination of all of that put together. You're not going to have peace until then. But the first order of business, you can't do none of that without getting rid of the system of white supremacy.
Okay. Darnell
Thank
from
you,
Phoenix.
sir.
Thank you so much for listening. All right, and asking your question. Okay, let's go to Minnesota, and we're going to have Ben. Ben, you're on with Mr. Fuller. What is your question, please?
Good morning, Mr. Fuller. Good morning, Mr. Bobby.
Good morning, sir.
Good. So my question this morning is on the topic truth also. And it seems like the code always talked about how whatever we do, we have to do it in a way that we get the most constructive outcome. Now, it seems like there are some truth that might or may produce some non-constructive outcome, or might produce a situation where justice isn't done. Now, is it okay, Mr. Fuller, to speak the truth? It is the truth, but doing so might produce a non-constructive outcome.
Yes, the words that you use, you reveal truth in such, the code says you reveal truth in such a manner that it produces a constructive result. You do everything in such a way that you produce a constructive result. Now, what is truth? Truth is a combination of facts, but you have to put those facts together in such a manner that truth is revealed, but truth must be revealed in a manner that produces a constructive result. You can use truth. You can tell the truth, but you can do it in such a way that it doesn't produce a constructive result. See, truth is a tool, but you have to go about revealing the truth, the time, the place, in such a way that you produce a constructive result. You can, let's see, I'll try to give an illustration, a simple one. Maybe use the old one that most people use. A fire breaks out in a building. Now, you can reveal information that the fire is in the building. and you're telling the truth. But you can do that in such a way that you do not produce a constructive result. That's why I say you use the truth in such a manner like you use any tool. Truth is a tool, but you use that tool in such a way that you produce a constructive result. I mean, so you can yell fire, and then you can point in the direction of the fire, but you pointed, but you didn't point in the direction of where all of the fire was, or how much. So you were telling the truth, but you didn't do it in such a manner that people knew how big the fire was or something like that. So you probably had to add some more words, which you didn't do. You just said, it's a fire, and you pointed in the direction of the fire. And that was true. But what you didn't do, you didn't point into the other direction where the people were going to run and say there's a fire over there too. See, now you did tell the truth. You know, if they take you to court and all like that, and you say, well, I told them it was a fire. It was a fire over here on the left side of the building. But I didn't tell them about that fire that was on the right side of the building. And they ran right into that fire. See, now, I did tell the truth. But I guess that's why they say in court, do you promise to tell the truth? And then they add something. The whole truth. And nothing but the truth. So help you God. See, so in other words, you tell it all. You just don't tell part of it.
Mm-hmm.
See, because that can be misleading.
Yes. Okay. All righty. Thank you there, my brother. Let's go here to a station break. You are listening to the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., heard here on Blog Talk Radio. To get in contact with the show, just call 516-453-9921. And if you have a question, press the number 1 button and you will get in line. Or if you just like to just listen to the show, you can do that also. You can also Gmail me at the numero 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, at gmail.com. And you can also access the show by getting in the chat room, and you're able to view all the conversations that are going on. But this is the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby, and we have about 31 minutes left in the show. So let's go back to the phone lines, and then we have this person here, James from North Carolina. Good morning, my brother.
Good morning, sir. I have a question for Mr. Fuller.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Fuller, you have stated that according to the compensatory counter-racist code, the system of white supremacy is a royalist system. Does an unjust king, who was a member of an unjust royal family, who becomes sick and is permanently unable to carry out his duties of mistreating his subjects, immediately lose his status as a member of the royal family? And under such an unjust royalist system, would not such a former king continue to receive rights, privileges, and preferential treatment that wouldn't be afforded to the mistreated subjects?
I didn't understand, maybe I didn't hear. My hearing's not too good either. Any of what you said. Is there any ways you can capitalize it, maybe, with your question?
Okay, I'll try my best, sir. Does an unjust king who
there's a what
member
now?
Of it?
Well, wait a minute. I want to get that.
I'm
there's
asking a question. Does an unjust king who, as a member of an unjust royal family who becomes sick and permanently unable to carry out his duties of mistreating his subjects, immediately lose his status as a member of the unjust royal family.
Does a unjust? I'm not maybe. Mr. Bobby, do you hear the question?
Yes, he said, does an unjust king, who I believe you said, James, gets sick and is unable to perform his duties unjustly on the subject. What was that last part, James? Does he what?
I asked the question, would that unjust king no longer be a part of the royal family just because he is no longer able to perform his duties of mistreating his subjects?
Okay.
Oh, I don't know. It depends on what context you're talking about. You're talking about a king, and you're talking about the royal family. It depends on whatever the rules are within the royal family or that society. If you're talking about within the context of racism, if a racist is unable to perform his or her duties as a racist, the person is no longer a racist. If in order to be a racist, you have to be practicing racism. That's it.
Okay. Can a person not be in a position where they're practicing racism by just being white? Just like a person who's non-white is a functional mistreated person by just existing, by being non-white?
Well, I'm missing something here. Maybe your question is too complicated for me to decipher, because I'm not really understanding the question. And
okay, can I
really
restate it?
I am really confused, and that's my fault, because I am supposed to try to understand what you're saying.
And I'm trying my best to help you to understand. And I'm sorry that I'm not able to do that.
That is my fault, because I'm supposed to be able to understand what you're saying. But it's my fault. It's just one of those situations where I don't think I understand what you're saying, or maybe I do.
Question then to try to make it easier. If I'm not mistaken, I think you have said that
counter-racist codification, definitely. It's a no-no for me to try to answer a question when I don't understand what the question is. And that is the fault of Neely Fuller. And that is a part of the code. Don't attempt to answer a question when you don't understand what the question is. Don't even attempt it, because you're not confident enough. And I just have to say, that's my fault, because I'm supposed to understand questions. I do not understand that question. I really don't. I don't know what the question is. But that is my fault. It is my job to understand a question. But this is just one of those situations where I don't understand the question. And I'm duty bound to the audience not to attempt to answer a question that I don't understand, because that causes what? Confusion. And that is deadly to counter-racist codification.
Sorry about that, James.
Sir. All right. Well, I appreciate your time.
Okay.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
All right. Thank you, James.
All right.
All righty. Bye.
Now, maybe somebody in the listening audience, because that's what this is, this is an open forum, does understand the question, and they can think about the answer to the question. and probably, later on in the program or the next program, somebody can call in and say, or rephrase the question in a certain way that maybe I can understand it, or somebody who calls in can say they understand the question and they have a codified answer, and we'll all learn something.
Okay, well, you put that out there.
That's the way it works.
Yes, you put that out there, so we will see. From the Gmail, Divitude says this, Mr. Fuller, can you explain why black people get so emotional over John Brown?
No.
Okay.
I can't explain it. The black people who get emotional, whatever that means, over John Brown, can probably explain why they are emotional over John Brown. Depends on what
the question
you mean
might
by
be,
emotion.
Mr. Fuller, for those who don't know, who was John Brown, or what does that term mean?
Well, they're probably talking about John Brown, I guess, of John Brown of Harper's Ferry, the white man who led a rebellion against slavery, presumably. Sometimes back during the time of slavery. And he was known as a nickname, Osawatomie Brown, after a town in Osawatomie, Kansas, where he went around killing white people. And he left there and later on led a rebellion against an insurrection, you might say, against slavery. A small protest that didn't last very long, less than a day or two. And he became famous in the history books because of it. I guess that's the John Brown that they're talking about.
Okay.
And the question was, why do some black people get emotional about John Brown? Well, because the black people who get emotional about John Brown can explain why they are emotional about John Brown, and probably raise the question, what do you mean by emotional, and what is that supposed to mean? Emotional in what way? How? In order to do what? And why they are emotional? I don't know. You have to ask the people who are emotional. That's the codified manner. That's the codified procedure.
All righty.
And ask what you mean. Also explain what you mean by emotional.
Okay. There you go, Divitude. Also from the Gmail, Mr. Fuller, you had mentioned this, I think in the first hour, but a brother in Montgomery, Alabama, Mr. Lush, said something about the information on the radio show here in Columbus on, I think it's Kahari and Aharo. Could you say what you said again, Straight Talk Live or whatever that was?
Oh, yes, that's Straight Talk Live, that's Radio 1. That's the name of the program. By Kahari and Aharo, 107.5, Columbus, Ohio, Radio 1. Now, when that program comes on, I don't know. You can probably find out on the internet. It should be pretty easy. That's WCKX, Radio 1, Straight Talk Live by Kahari and Aharo. And he has written a book, Race Code War. And I've glanced through it. I have a copy. And it seems to have some excellent information in it that will cause people to think. I think so, just in glancing through it. And I understand he has one called The Race Code Sex War, or something like that. I'm not pronouncing the title correctly because I don't have a copy of that book. but I've heard him mention it. Anyhow, he's a person that I used to be on his radio program a lot, and he has invited me to come to Columbus, Ohio on several occasions to make talks. Back in the 1970s it started, and he liked a lot of what I was doing, and he's written books following that same pattern, trying not to write the same book that I have written. And I think he did an excellent job of that, too, at a glance. I don't know for sure because I haven't gone through the whole book. But I'd like to say to the radio, to the Internet, the podcast audience, don't write Neely Fuller's book all over again. Some people have sent me copies of what they're starting to write, and they're basically copying the book. Neely Fuller's book does not need to be copied. Try to say something that's completely different from what Neely Fuller has written, but it will be code. There's plenty of room for solving this race problem. There's plenty of subjects. In fact, you might just pick one subject to codify. But what is codification? It's about doing and saying things that counter white supremacy, that help to eliminate racism, that the individual person can do. That's what a compensatory counter-racist code is about. It's about addressing everything to the individual person. If you know something that an individual person can do to make things better on a job, try to write a pamphlet or a book or something like that and walk them through it. That when this happens, you should do this. When this, and this happens, you should say this. See, we need more books like that. Books about what to do about things. Not books just about talking about how black people feel and, and how black people have been through this, that, and the other. We have millions of books, and these books should be read, as many of them as you can read, but we need more books about what to do, and not just what to do as a collective group, what black people as a collection ought to do, but we need more and more books about and more programs about what the individual black person can do. Because in this prison system called the system of white supremacy, the white supremacists know how to deal with groups. They know how to deal with groups of people. Hypothetically, what they can't deal with is when each individual non-white person is codified, becomes an army of one, knows what to do and what not to do in every circumstance. The white supremacists are not going to be able to deal with that. That's the entire compensatory, united, independent, compensatory, counter-racist concept.
Okay. Let's go to Tony in Little Rock. Let me see here. Tony, I think I got you up here. Okay, go ahead, Tony. Hello, Tony? Okay, once, twice. Okay, Tony, can't get you here. Let's go to Stan in Pennsylvania, I believe it is. Okay, Stan?
Yes, good morning, gentlemen.
Okay, good morning.
Yes, sir. I had called in last week, and I don't think that my question was understood.
Oh, yeah, I remember, yeah. Go ahead, Stan.
Yes, Yes, and you were suggesting that I look into, Roger Taney and the Supreme Court Dred Scott decision. But I'm aware of all of that. I was referring to what Mr. Fuller had said that, and I think we all understand this, is that, white people are raised to not think that black people are intelligent. They don't have to listen to us and, all of that. And many of us have experienced this on jobs or, in the military or whatever, where, we can suggest something and they just ignore us or just, blow us off. But Mr. Fuller had also said that there are times when, if they feel like you know something, that they'll come looking for you, if you have some sort of knowledge or something. But the question that I had is that I have witnessed situations where white people have ignored black people. It could be a police officer or a teacher or a doctor, someone with extreme expertise, and it can be very harmful and damaging to that white person if they don't listen to this black man or this black woman. And so my question is simple: is white supremacy that serious to them that they will sacrifice a life of their own or their family to uphold this system? And also just these situations where they're willing to listen to black people, could he talk about that as well? And I like to stay
It's in the textbook for victims of white supremacy, and it is that I've written that you can get by going to producejustice.com. It's what is called white sacrifices. The white supremacists sacrifice white people all the time. They had a whole thing called Civil War, which there's no such thing as a civilized war, but that's what a lot of people choose to call it. And it was about how we're going to handle these black people. And so, hey, we're having a big dispute about that. And you see just instances of it, almost every day, you might say, somewhere on the planet, that is going on. A white person actually killing another white person about how the business of white supremacy is going to be conducted. They do this all the time, somewhere on the planet, 24/7. Small incidences here and there, but they don't do it in such a way that it harms the whole infrastructure, you might say, to use that word, of the system of white supremacy. It's like Pete Clemenza, the fictional character in the movie The Godfather. Yes. Many people might remember on the firing range in the basement, presumably of a house, one of the gangsters in the movie The Godfather, Pete Clemenza was his name in the movie, talking to Michael Corleone, he says, I'm going to teach you how to use this gun and whatnot, said, since you're going to do this part of the family business, say, but I'm going to tell you about the family business. Said, we all, mobsters, and we have fallen out among ourselves about how the business is being run. We're going to sell drugs to black people up here in Harlem, but every now and then we get into a dispute about how we're going to be doing it. And so every now and then we got to clean out the bad blood. That's how he described it. So it happens every 10, 15 years. It's been 10 years since the last one, Michael. It cleans out the bad blood. We start all over again, shake hands, just like they did during the so-called Civil War. General Grant shook hands with Robert E. Lee. Two opposing forces. After all that carnage, it was a whole bunch of white people who killed white people. They killed each other. They slaughtered each other. Basically about what? How are we going to handle these black people? Okay? How are we going to go about doing it? We're going to handle them, but we're having a great big dispute about how we're going to go about doing it. And that dispute is going to explode in the killing. So we kill each other.
Okay, but on the smaller side of it, though, what I'm asking is that if a white person who's a white supremacist gets advice from a heart surgeon, or a teacher is trying to give a white family advice about their child, what I'm asking also additionally is that is a white person in their own mind, are they thinking about the system of white supremacy to such an extent that they would disregard this information that could be beneficial to them or their family?
That has to do with the structure of white supremacists, because the presumption is anything that a black person says and knows, they got it from a white person anyway. So in the white mind, if a person is a white supremacist, said that black person doesn't know anything worth knowing on his own, so I'm going to the source. So that white person, listening to that black person, would just go down the hall and search out the white person who gave that black person the information. Because a black person is not supposed to know anything worth knowing that a white person doesn't already know 1,000 years ago. That's the presumption. That's why a lot of white people act the way that they do. I'm not listening to this Negro tell me something. What does he know about anything that's worth knowing that white people didn't know 1,000,000 years ago? Because we're 1,000,000 years ahead of them. So if this dumb black person thinks he's telling me something that I need to know, it's a trillion white people who knew that when they were 3 years old. And he's up here with his 50-year-old self going to tell a white man anything about anything that white people didn't teach him. That's just the way many, most you might say, white people think in the system of white supremacy. Anything that this black person knows, 3-year-old white people know that. I mean, you know, when he learned it at age 50, a 3-year-old white person already knew it. That's how they look at things, to give kind of a rough example, in the system of white supremacy. I mean, all black people are basically dumb, all right? Even when they think they're smart, to a white supremacist.
Okay.
No exceptions.
Thank you, Stan,
right.
for rephrasing your question and calling in. Thank you very much. Okay, final call, I believe, today will be from Ishmael from Chicago. Very quickly here. We have about 5 minutes. Ishmael, you're on with Mr. Fuller. What is your question?
Hello, Mr. Fuller. I'm Mr. Bobby.
Good morning,
quick
sir.
Question. And I would like to kind of follow up on a previous caller's question. You just now said that most white supremacists think whatever we know they have already known. I would like to know, one, do you think that's true? That they do pretty much anything we think we do know, they have already surpassed the knowledge? Do you find it to be true, or do you just find it to be a thought process that's based out of falseness? And the other question is this.
Let Mr. Fuller answer that question first, and then quickly, if we have time, for the second one.
Okay.
For the most part, they're justified in thinking that that's true. And there's plenty of indication that it is true. And logically speaking, it could be true. Because black people have to understand, we were born in the system of white supremacy. So just about everything that we know, including trying to halfway calling ourselves being gangsters, we learned it from them because we've never known anything else. We are born in their system. We are born in their prison system. So they are our greatest teachers. We don't have any teachers other than them. And the teachers who came up under them were taught by them directly or indirectly. And we don't have any mysterious knowledge that they don't have. So it's logical that they would think that way, for the most part. Now, there are exceptions, what you call miracles. There are miracle people among black people who get messages that come to them directly from our Creator. Now, these are the exceptions, but how can you tell? For the average person, how can you tell the difference? You can only tell the difference by the results. And so far, none of the miracle people have figured out what to do about white supremacy. And why do I say that? Because white supremacy is still here, that's why.
That's why. Okay, Ishmael, what is your second question, quickly?
Okay. Previously, I heard you say the most least confused person in the room is the most powerful. If what you just now said is correct, how can we ever become more powerful, do you think?
By a code. The most powerful people on the planet are codified. The white supremacists are more codified than anybody. Meaning what? They know how cause and effect works better than anybody. They study everything in detail because you have to be a student. You have to be willing to be a student. You walk around thinking that you know everything, you're not a student. You have ceased to be a student. You have ceased to learn. And when you cease to learn, you will be overtaken by people who have not ceased to learn. The white supremacists are always willing to learn everything. They have a thirst for knowledge and understanding of everything, every grain of sand, every insect. They want to be able to name that insect and tell you what that insect does and what that insect doesn't do and how the insect's eyes work, right down to the smallest insect. They want to know all about it. How many eyes that insect has. They said this particular insect has 12 eyes, and this particular eye does this particular function, and the other eye does this particular function. They want to know all of that. Why? That makes them powerful.
I see.
The most powerful people are the people with the most knowledge and understanding. That's always been.
All righty. Mr. Fuller, thank you. Thank you, all the callers. We've run out of time, so we got to give this to Mr. Fuller. Mr. Fuller, we have exactly 2 minutes and 15 seconds to go. So in that time limit, I need you to speak about your book and then close out the program for us.
I have a book in which this program is based on called The Compensatory Counter-Racist Code. It has 3 titles: textbook, workbook for victims of white supremacy, paraphrasing one of the titles, the United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept. That's the main title. But all these titles are explained in the book itself. But the book is designed to help the individual non-white person who is a victim of white supremacy to function in the system of white supremacy and function in such a way that you are eroding the system of white supremacy. You're taking bits and pieces away from it, of its power, when you do and say, theoretically, the things that are in this book. And that if a number of people adopt some of the things in the textbook for victims of white supremacy, you are disrupting the system of white supremacy as an individual person. And you can get the book by going to producejustice.com. Producejustice.com.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fuller. Thank you, callers. Thank you for all your questions and your concerns, your VGQs. Special thanks to Moon Pie and Robert. Condolences to you. Thank you for being on the job today, and thank you for having Ms. Sharon do last week. Apologize for all the mistakes that were made today. We'll try to get better. Thank you, Mr. Fuller. We will do better next week. So thanks all of you for tuning in. And again, thank you, Mr. Fuller.
I really need to do better. I didn't answer a question today. Thank you.
All right, we'll see you next week. Thank you.